All right, welcome in everybody, and this is episode number 2 of 5 Minute History, and we're going to talk about the Orient Express. So, if this is your first time watching the video, let me just explain the setup to you a little bit. So, I summarized the topic, and then we're going to talk about something bad related to the topic. Then we're going to talk about something good related to the topic, and then we'll talk about a woman or minority who sometimes gets overlooked in this particular topic. After that, we're going to talk about something you may not have heard about the topic. And then finally, I'm going to sum up the whole topic, and we're trying to get it all done around 5 minutes. All right, here we go. As I often do with these sorts of things, I'm going to make fun of this man's hairline. Look at this dude. He should have been wearing this hat for this photo. What was this photographer thinking? Look at this man. You'll notice a recurring theme with wealthier individuals back in the day. Their hairlines were at the back of their head for the most part. Very strange indeed. Somebody needs to help this man out. So, Orient Express. Who is this man on the screen? His name is, and I might butcher this, Georgius Nagelmakers. So in addition to his strange hairline, his name is also very unusual. Georgius Nagelmakers. He's wealthy, and he's from a banking family in Belgium. And the idea for the Orient Express, or this luxury train, is going to start with him. So he's going to visit the United States, and he's going to ride on a train, and the train has Pullman cars, sleeping cars. They are very, very nice, luxurious, and he is impressed by these sleeping cars and thinks that there's going to be a demand for these cars in Europe because they had nothing like this before. So he's going to approach the guy who created the Pullman car and get him, or try and get him, to help him develop these sleeping cars for Europe. Okay, so that's a little bit of the background about who he is and how this train is going to get started. So again, as you saw in my first slide, the time period for the train's operation is 1889 to about 1977. And that can vary depending on which Orient Express we're talking about, because there's several of them, but I'm not going to spoil my later slide by explaining that right now. So the who, we have Georgius Nagelmakers. The when, we're in the late 1800s through the 1900s. What are we talking about? This is going to be a luxury train for the super duper wealthy. And I don't just mean like average wealthy people. I mean like super wealthy people, like the 1%ers of Europe. Okay, that's who this train is targeted towards. So there's sleeping cars on these trains. There's fancy interiors. There's extraordinary cuisine. There's a whole bunch of stuff that people with too much money are going to pay for. So where's the train going to travel? So it's going to go across Europe. It's going to start in Paris and end in Istanbul, or what was called Constantinople at the time. So from Paris to Constantinople. Travel time is going to vary from like 60 to 80 hours. Okay. And initially the train is going to stop at various places, but eventually it's going to go nonstop through all of these different countries with all of these wealthy people on board, basically feeding them and allowing them to socialize. That's the whole point of this. So why would we do such a thing? So there's supply and demand. All right. There's a whole bunch of people in Europe that have too much money and they don't know what to do with it. And this man is going to see that and going to see a business opportunity. All right, moving on. Bad meaning bad. So something terrible that happened at that time. So in the 1930s, so this is about 40 years into the running of the Orient Express, a bridge that the Orient Express is crossing is going to be demolished by a terrorist bomb. Now, they didn't call it a terrorist attack at the time, I don't believe. But this guy planted an explosive device on this bridge and detonated it right when the train was crossing. And it killed, I want to say, over 100 people. Some on the train, some in the vicinity. Terrible circumstance. They eventually caught this man and executed him. He was responsible for numerous bridges being destroyed throughout this time period. So a terrible thing that took place during this time. There are also numerous accidents involving the Orient Express. I'm not going to go too far into this, but they involve train derailments and people being killed in stations and such, because unlike today, that was a common occurrence back then. There were all these accidents involving trains, industrial factories, all of those things. Okay, something good about this. You can see here, this is a recreation of the interior of an Orient Express dining car. Okay. And we're talking about like the best of the best. We're talking about crystal glassware. We're talking about teak furniture. We're talking about brass fittings. We're talking about all the things that wealthy people want in a hotel, but it's in a train, which is kind of crazy. So just to break this down even further, so there were dining cars on this train, there were sleeping cars, and then there were cars to socialize in. Okay, so they had all of those things, and every single car had the best that money could buy. So they would change their sheets every day. The bathrooms had hot water. The food was off the wall. They had food from France, Germany, Italy, and it was all cooked right on the spot and served daily. And all of the furniture, like I said, was top notch. All of the crystal, all the glassware, all the service was the best of the best. Okay. All right, for the ladies and for the fellas. So that is Greta Garbo right there. She was a movie star in the early 1900s in the United States. She actually got her start in silent films. And then once films were given audio, she was also very popular in those films. I don't know a ton about Greta Garbo. I'm going to be honest with you. I went through her list of movies and I had not heard of one. Okay, but apparently she was a big deal back in the day. So much so that she would go over and ride the Orient Express from Paris to Constantinople. And at the very end, in Constantinople, there was a hotel where all of these people would stay. Of course, it cost a tremendous amount of money to stay there. And she frequented so often that they actually named some rooms after her in the hotel that was in Constantinople. So they're all named after Greta Garbo, one of the most famous film stars of the time. Okay, finally, or next to finally, not finally. If you don't know, now you know. So there wasn't just one route for the Orient Express. There were several. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. 5 different variations of the Orient Express in the route. And you'll see the years vary on there depending on what time and what train we're talking about. So the one that I'm going to focus on is the green one, because that's the one that's probably the most important. And that's the one that ran directly from Paris to Istanbul nonstop. Okay. So that was the final or the most popular iteration of this route. And you can see there's other routes that were taken. And sometimes they would stop at places and would have to switch trains or even take a boat. You can see right here, they would have to take a boat across the Black Sea to Istanbul during the final leg when the train first opened. So the routes varied, and one other thing about this, service was stopped intermittently for wars. So World War I, 1914 to 1918, they had to stop service. World War II, they had to stop service for the entire time. And it's at one point, they wanted to avoid Germany altogether with the Orient Express and went completely around Germany because Germany was often a belligerent in both world wars. So you have all these different routes, and you can see one other thing I want to point out before we move on here. So there was an Orient Express that got going in the 2000s and ran 2001 to 2007 and then 2007 to 2009 and ran from Paris to Vienna. And I don't know if it went all the way to Istanbul. I don't think it did. Can't really tell here because these lines blend. And then maybe went on to Budapest. So there was different trains, different routes. But again, like I said, the most popular one, the one that gets talked about the most, is the one from Paris to Istanbul, or at the time it was called Constantinople. Finally, we're going to sum it up. Dollar bills. The Orient Express was one of the very first luxury travel experiences. This is why it always gets talked about. It became world-renowned for its gaudiness and opulence. This is a prime example of how an entrepreneur seeing a need and filling it, but is also a great example of how being wealthy can afford you business opportunities not available to the average citizen. So like I said, Georges Nagelmakers came from a wealthy family and was able to talk to other wealthy people to get funding for this train and talk to heads of European countries that would allow his train to travel through these different countries. None of that would be accessible to a normal person, even if they had this idea. So being born into a wealthy family was definitely advantageous. All in all, I think the Orient Express is an interesting story to explore, especially as it relates to our infatuation with exorbitant wealth and conspicuous consumption. Because, like everybody knows, we love watching shows today about people that have money or hearing stories about people that have money and how they spend it and the ridiculous things they sometimes buy with it and the homes they live in, the yachts they sail on. We love that. And they loved that back in the day. So people loved reading about the Orient Express. They loved hearing stories about it. And I think that just carries over through generations. People love hearing about wealth and how wealth is spent, particularly if they don't have a lot of wealth. All right, that's it. Remember, give it a thumbs up if you like the material. Give me a shout out. If you want to hear about a particular topic, feel free to leave it in the comments section. And I appreciate y'all. Bye bye.